South China Sea, Vietnam will deal with China only bilaterally. In other words, not seeking support or involvement from other countries. And then let's look at South Korea and the turmoil political situation in South Korea. I just looked at the recent polls. Moon Jae-in is way ahead in terms of party preferences for the next president. His party is at 45% in the polls. What's left of the Sonori party, 13%. The People's Party, 12%. If the Constitutional Court rules against President Park, which it seems to me is highly likely, and an election takes place as early as May, Moon Jae-in looks like a very heavy favorite to become the next president of South Korea. Now, what does that mean for the alliance? He has said that his first visit will be to North Korea rather than the United States. He has also said that a top priority of his foreign policy will be to strengthen relations with the People's Republic of China. He has voiced skepticism, to put it mildly, about the THAAD proposal, about implementation of the agreement with regard to the THAAD. There are other issues, depending on how he negotiates with the North. Reopening of Kaesong, the OPCON agreement, even the issue of future U.S. military exercises, U.S. deployments on a rotational basis of advanced weapon systems that he may well raise and begin to question with the United States. So the Trump administration already faces this challenge in the South China Sea. And the question is, with the issue that represents, what are the options for the Trump administration to deal with a rejection of the THAAD proposal?
Thank you, Larry. Okay, Mike, you have to respond.
Why don't I make notes and let others speak for a while, and I'll see what I can say later on.
Thank you, Mike, for your usual excellent overview of the strategic situation. I would like to express a mild dissent and indicate that I think their optimism is warranted with some of the approach the Trump administration is hinting at. And I think they're long overdue on North Korea, on South China Sea, and on Taiwan. I would like to pick up on the comparison you made in the Tillerson and Mattis comments, and how you contrasted what China is doing in the South China Sea to what Russia has done in Ukraine and Crimea. You made the point that, unlike Putin, Xi Jinping has not directed his assertive or aggressive behavior at a particular country. And I think that's more or less true. But the flip side of that is that he's directed his assertiveness at the entire world. The claims he's making in terms of these reclaimed islands have maritime implications. They're claiming the territorial seas around each of those islands. And that restricts access by the United States and the entire world. And I'd be interested in your reaction to that.
Yes.
Thank you. The first thing I'd like to take a second to say, all of you might have heard that on Wednesday, Annie Faleoma Vega, the long-term congressman, a delegate from American Samoa, passed away. I just wanted to say, I worked for 4 members of Congress during my 13 years in the House Foreign Affairs Committee. My last boss, and the only Democrat, was Faleoma Vega. But I think it should be recognized, his passing, in that he was the first Asian Pacific Islander to head the House Asia subcommittee, and certainly was a true friend of the peoples of the Asia Pacific, and especially Korea. I think it should be remembered when he became chairman of the House Asia Subcommittee in 2007, the first hearing that he held was on the comfort women issue with comfort women survivor witnesses from both Korea and Australia. In fact, till this day, that's the only hearing. He also visited on repeated occasions the House of Sharing in South Korea, where the comfort women survivors live. And in his retirement, you can look it up, he wrote a couple commentaries in the Hillsdale newspaper, both at the time of Prime Minister Abe's visit to Washington and after the 215 South Korean Japanese foreign minister agreement on the comfort women. He wrote a couple commentaries, so he stayed active in his retirement. So I'd just like to pay tribute to his memory. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation, Mr. O'Hanlon. I'd just say a couple things on the One China policy. You know, it's true that President Trump discussed this with Xi Jinping. When you discuss One China policy and you go back to the three communiques, it's a little bit like the Catholic Church defining the Immaculate Conception. The words and the history are extremely important, and one has to be almost a scholar of canon law to understand what they're talking about. I don't want to sound like Kellyanne Conway and talk about alternative facts, but I have to say some of the reporting on the phone call, it said, the Washington Post, for example, President Trump said he honors Beijing's One China policy that recognizes Taiwan as being under the People's Republic, even though it has a separate government. Well, that was not exactly correct. I looked at the White House transcript. It says honors our One China policy. I think it should be noted for the record that when Henry Kissinger and Zhou Enlai negotiated the Shanghai Communique in 1972, the two sides agreed to disagree on Taiwan and the One China policy. China, of course, said Taiwan is a province and no one should interfere with the Taiwan issue. The United States said we acknowledge that Chinese on both sides of the Strait Sea say there's one China. We don't dispute this, but we look for a peaceful solution that includes the opinions of Chinese on both sides of the strait. So I think it should be pointed out also the White House press release on this said President Trump honors our One China policy, which would be the U.S. One China policy, because to honor Beijing's One China policy would have been a change in U.S. policy. Also, the other thing that the word honors, which the White House uses, that verb, as I said, every word on the One China policy is important. I think people would have preferred to stick to the traditional word acknowledge rather than honor. So that's the point. On the South China Sea, and discussing that it's true most of these man-made islands are under China. You mentioned the Scarborough Shoal. I would just mention that the largest island rock, whatever it is, that is above water 24 hours a day, Taipingdao, is actually under the administrative control of Taiwan. So let's not forget that. It's the biggest piece of real estate in the South China Sea. On trade issues, I would just say, yes, I agree completely with Mr. O'Hanlon, the TPP. My view is the Asia Pacific is now the main player economically in the world, and if you're going to go play poker and you don't have a seat at the table, you can't play. So that's the point there. I would think also there is some concern still about, with Peter Navarro in the White House in this new position as special trade rep, whether there will be punitive tariffs against 45% tariffs against China as a currency manipulator. I think it's very important for other countries in Asia, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, to pay attention if there was ever a tariff to see if it says Chinese owned goods from Chinese companies or Chinese origin goods, because let's not forget, Foxconn, for example, the Taiwanese chip maker that supplies Dell computers and many other people, the management and capital might be Taiwanese, but the factories and labor force are in China. I think the same is true for Korea's Samsung. So if you had Chinese content products put on a 45% tariff, you could see a tariff on Dell computers with Foxconn chips. You could see a tariff on Samsung TVs if they were actually manufactured in a factory in China. Then I'll just finally talking about North Korea. And if you want to read more on the One China policy, I had Global Taiwan Institute does a bi-weekly newsletter. I wrote an article that goes into this whole One China policy called Trump's Taiwan Policy. The jury is out, so you could look at that if you want to read the details. On the missile, I agree. Mr. Trump drew a red line with his tweet, as Mr. O'Hanlon pointed out, which was kind of surprising after all the criticism about President Obama's red line with Syria. I only say that the missile that was shot during the Abu summit was a short-range missile. Trump was talking about long-range ballistic missiles, so they didn't have time to shoot it down. So that still doesn't mean Mr. Trump wouldn't try to shoot down a long-range missile. I mean, I don't know, nobody knows, but that it would be in the air long enough to shoot it down. And on the issue of China, North Korea policy, I wrote something yesterday. It's with NK News. It hasn't come out, but it says, "Don't bite the hand that feeds you." It points out a long list of how Kim Jong-un, unlike his father and his grandfather very skillfully played off the Sino-Soviet split to get concessions from both Beijing and Moscow. His father, Kim Jong-il, visited China 7 times, even right before he died. He went in his last 2 years 3 times. He went to the Shanghai stock market. He did a repeat of Deng Xiaoping's southern tour in 2006 of the free economic zones. So at least Kim Jong-il pretended that he was interested in market opening and reform, which the Chinese wanted. Kim Jong-un has not been to China at all. And I think I don't know when the Chinese are finally going to get fed up, but this article, when it comes out, it lists all the insulting things he's done to China, like doing a nuclear test in 2006 during the Lunar Chinese New Year, when all the Chinese officials had to go back from their hometowns to Beijing. So I guess that's about all my comments. I enjoyed your comments.
So, guys. Okay. Now, you have something to chip in?
Thank you. Concerning Dr. O'Hanlon's comments, from a Korean standpoint, no great policy, no great options. Multiply that by 1,000, and that's how a Korean feels right now, I think. The squeeze on North Korea by the Chinese, I think we really need to realize the level of contempt that the North Koreans have for the Chinese. They've been saying privately and publicly how they despise the Chinese. And they even tell us South Koreans, I mean, how can you trust the Chinese? So I think it's going to be a good test or practice as we see what the relationship is going to morph into in the coming months, as we have a pro-Chinese brother being killed, and see what that happens. It also seems that the North Koreans are now knocking on Middle Eastern countries, even to the Palestinians, for new relationships. So maybe they have other ideas of increasing their options. But most interesting, what you said, Larry, about Moon Jae-in. So this is what Moon Jae-in said about going to North Korea. He said, if it will contribute to the resolution of the North Korean nuclear problem, I will consult with neighboring countries, which means Japan, United States, and China, and could feasibly visit North Korea first. That's what he said. So remember during World War II in the Pacific, the Marines had a saying, only believe 1/4 of what you hear and half of what you see. I think we need to be very careful about what